Hello everyone, welcome back to the show. My name's Dan with another episode of Exploder just for you. In this episode I want to talk about a concept I've thought of over the years, and I've explained it to my friends and people that talk about wrestling, but it's something I wanted to bring out and really talk about just sort of how I see the business and how I see certain things. So understand, I'm talking completely as a fan. I always make that very clear in this show. I don't think that I have some kind of insider knowledge that no one else has. I'm reading Dave Meltzer and second and third hand websites like the rest of you. I don't claim to have any ideas. I'm not going to tell Eric Bischoff how to run a company. I'm not going to tell Vince McMahon how to do, second-rate football. The point is, I'm just a fan like everybody else. But from what I gather, what I gain from the internet and reading interviews, and I like to go on interviews. I don't like to go on rumor. I like to go on interviews coming directly from them, because when a wrestler says something in an interview, it's very clear and it's very concise, and it's exactly, like, you get a good idea of how they feel and what's going on, and you get the idea over time. You get a better picture. I mean, because quite frankly, you get an idea. World War Animal thinks that the Legion of Doom, Road Warriors, whatever you want to call them, are the best tag team of all time. Now, people have argued that and debated, and I'm not here to argue that. What I am saying is you get that picture because he's done a bunch of interviews talking about it, and he's talked about the criteria as they've won the belts everywhere they went, and these territories and things like that. And I've mentioned that I think that's sort of a weird thing to do, because that's a criteria that can never be equaled again, because there are no territories. But you get that from interviews over time, and he talks about it, so you have an idea of what he thinks of himself. You get an idea from a guy named like Bully Ray or Devon or a Taz character, guys who actually have their own podcast. Sometimes you get an idea from them. In this episode, I'm here to talk about the kind of guys where you get a full picture of who they are, and quite frankly, when you get to it, you don't like what you see. I'm here to talk about the Bobs. Bob in this case is an acronym for bitter old bastards. The wrestling business is filled with a lot of guys who are really talented, really good, guys who go through their careers, have fun, have their ups and downs, retire, and talk well about the business. Probably the best one I can imagine and really talk about is the guy who has a really great idea of the business, who talks about the business, and doesn't seem bitter in the slightest. And you're talking about Steve Austin, arguably one of the biggest stars of all time. You could argue between him and Hogan, but the biggest of all time. He doesn't come off as bitter. He doesn't come off as bashing kids these days and things like that. The bitter old bastards are the guys who do. They spend their entire time just trashing everything that's different. These kids with their drop kicks. These kids with their high-flying maneuvers. I'm sure the first time someone drop-kicked somebody, there was an old school guy who used to wrestle on mats outside of fairgrounds who, lost their collective minds. These kids with their drop kicks. And there's always that transition, generational thing, right? But the bitter old bastards take it beyond, it's not my style, but it's okay. You should learn to work slower, you should do that. I understand that generational thing. Yes, there are a lot of guys now who are doing bumps and not matches, and there's a difference. There are guys who rely on moves too much. Young Bucks, the super kick. And there are guys who aren't necessarily working a style that an older guy would work. But the bitter old bastards, the Bobs, are the people that go that extra mile. And they just hate everything. It's not that they don't like this match or this type of wrestling or this, that, and the other. They don't like anything. And there's a collection of guys I want to talk about, and I'm going to get to them individually over time. I'm going to do different episodes of different guys. Superstar Billy Graham is a good example. A guy who's just miserable. He's trashing the current Daniel Bryan, Kofi Kingston storyline based solely on the fact that, Kofi Kingston's smaller than Billy Graham was in his height, because Kofi Kingston is on steroids and hepatitis. The point is, that's what he sees it a certain way, and he's really bitter about it, and that's, I don't like that. But I'm not talking about Billy Graham today. I'm going to talk about one of the worst bitter old bastards, still kicking around, still talking trash about everyone under the sun. That's right, Bret Hart. Bret Hart started wrestling, of course. I don't need to explain the story to you. Stampede Wrestling under Stu Hart. One of what's probably 1,500 Hart kids. All were wrestlers or married wrestlers or, Anyway, Bret Hart came in when Stampede was bought out. He came to the WWF, worked from the WWF from the early 80s until the late 90s. Left in November 1997 after Montreal because, if you don't leave after Montreal, what the hell are you doing with your life? And after that, there's an understandable period where you could expect him to be a little bitter. And he even said in his book, I've read his book, and again, I like to take, there's a context here. Maybe he was very bitter when he wrote the book, but unfortunately, a lot of things he said since then about certain people people has not helped his case that it was just a temporary bitterness. I understand leaving in November of 97 after Montreal, after Vince McMahon and Shawn Michaels, and being bitter. I get that for a while. I understand it. And for the record, anyone who's, before this gets anywhere, anyone who says something like, oh, Montreal was a work, if it was a work, first of all, there would have to be a payoff. The Vince McMahon, Bret Hart non-match match doesn't count as a payoff. Sorry, doesn't. And it had to work guys like Jim Cornette, Jim Ross, Pat Patterson. I mean, you would have to work guys that just, there's no point in working them, whatever. But that's beside the point. I can understand a little bit of bitterness right after it happened. But what made Bret specifically, what makes Bret a bitter old bastard is that he's, not only did he trash talk Vince McMahon, understandably, not only did he trash talk Shawn Michaels, again, understandably, and not only, even indirectly, if he trash talked Triple H. Yeah, okay, because he was involved in Montreal, I get it. But if you look at what Bret Hart says on a regular basis, and has since ever, if you read his book, or you hear him doing interviews, you read some of his articles, or this, that, and the other, the following is a list of people that Bret Hart has buried in an interview for God knows who, or a radio interview, or an article, or whatever. He has talked about Montreal. He has buried Shawn Michaels, Vince McMahon, Triple H, Eric Bischoff, because of his time in WCW. To this day, Bret Hart still talks about Eric Bischoff in a lot of unkind terms, and I'm not going to repeat them. They're bad. And you could say, well, they could have done more with Bret Hart in WCW. They could have. I mean, they could have done a lot more than everything. I mean, WCW could have still been in business. You know, there's a lot more they could have done. But for someone to be talking about, you know, he got Goldberged in December of '99, and to still be talking trash about a guy like Eric Bischoff 20 years later, that's just weird. I don't get that. Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, Seth Rollins, Samoa Joe. These are guys he's all talked trash about. He's never been in the ring with Samoa Joe. He's never been in the ring with Seth Rollins, but the two of them, he said both of them are unsafe in the ring. He says Samoa Joe because Samoa Joe did the Muscle Buster, a move he had been doing at that point for, what, a decade? And he did it one time. TJ Wilson, let's call it TJ Wilson, you know, landed wrong, and it unfortunately ended his career, but it was a freak accident. But Bret Hart made it his mission to talk about how unsafe Samoa Joe was. Whatever. Seth Rollins, with you know, one case where he broke John Cena's nose, he talked about him being unsafe. This is a guy who I think what it comes down to, and he talks about Ric Flair, in his book he says Ric Flair never had psychology. That's the biggest load of crap I've ever heard in my life. Oh, Ric Flair didn't have any psychology. Bull. He's talked about Hogan, and him and Hogan politically, I understand that they had issues. I'm not saying they didn't, but he takes it to the level where, again, he still talks about him. He still talks trash about these guys years later. But you know, one guy he doesn't talk trash about, which is weird, he has a really strong opinion and he's not bitter about, is Goldberg. The guy who, unintentionally, mind you, I'm not blaming Goldberg, I'm not saying he's a horrible person, but unintentionally, Goldberg kicked the career out of Bret Hart. He's not bitter about that. He's fine with it. They had a talk, they had dinner, I don't know what the hell they did, and they're cool. But all these other people he still talks about. He still talks trash about Hogan, and he still doesn't like Flair, and he still talks about Eric Bischoff. In 2019, he talks trash about Eric Bischoff. And as recent as a couple of years ago, he did an interview where he said Triple H has never had a good match. He said that in an interview. This is after he made up with the company, by the way. This is after he made amends with Shawn Michaels and Vince McMahon. He still did an interview saying that Triple H never had a great match. And you know, when it comes down to why is he like this? And I'll tell you what it comes down to. And it comes down to really what I think is the biggest problem with him. And you'll see this actually in Wrestling with Shadows. If you haven't seen it, at this point, I don't know who hasn't seen it. If you're a wrestling fan, if you haven't seen Wrestling with Shadows, you need to turn in your card because you don't know what the hell you're doing. The biggest problem I think with him is, and it shows in his book, and it shows in when he's doing interviews, when Bret Hart says, when Shawn Michaels said he was the Heartbreak Kid, there was this thing like you knew it was a gimmick, right? You get this idea, Shawn Michaels wrote this in his book as well. You could tell there was a difference between Shawn Michaels and Michael Hickenbottom, his real name. Yeah, break the kayfabe. There's a difference, right? With Bret Hart, I don't know. I never saw the difference. I don't think he sees the difference. I think Bret Hart, when he says the best there was, the best there is, the best there ever will be, I think every time he said that, I think he was reinforcing in his own head. He really believes that. He thinks he's the best there is. That's the only reason why I can explain why he was talking trash about Hogan. Why he talked about how Ric Flair never had any psychology in his matches. Oh, Ric Flair just did the same matches over and over and over. The reason why he says he is the ultimate judge of, wow, Triple H never had a great match. Bull. okay? Gonna say that right now. Bull. And people can say what they want about Triple H. And Triple H is, as I said, there are three guys in the wrestling business. There's the guy who works with the guy, and then everyone else. And everyone else is from, the upper mid-card down. You can do a great career and never be the guy, or never be a guy who works with the guy. The guy is a Hulk Hogan, a Ric Flair, a Stone Cold Steve Austin, a John Cena, a Rock. Those are the guys. Those are the guys that build a company around. The guy who works with the guy is Randy Savage, Edge, Bret Hart, Kevin Nash, guys who work with the guy. Triple H was never the guy. He was never a franchise guy. He was never, John Cena, but he was a guy who worked with the guy. He could always have a good angle with whoever was champion, and that's what made him good. So, but for Bret Hart, even these many years later, to look at somebody like him and say, oh, he's never had a good match. First of all, what makes you the arbiter? What makes Bret Hart the arbiter of what's a good match? First of all, BS. Second, that's just not true. It's a thing, another guy who I've heard has actually got better. I've heard more recent interviews with him, but Dr. D. David Schultz. And David Schultz years ago did an interview, and he said to the effect of, oh, Hulk Hogan never got over. Now, I understand, he didn't like Hulk Hogan and, whatever the issues they had, but that's just wrong. Like, you can have your opinion on somebody and not like somebody, but you have to acknowledge facts. For him to say Hulk Hogan was never over, that's bull. I mean, that's absolute bull. So Bret to say, oh, Triple H never had a good match, well, that's wrong. That's absolutely wrong. You can not like him. You can not like his role in Montreal. You can think this, that, and the other, and everyone has an opinion. But to say that, oh, he's never been good because I don't like him, well, that's just stupid. So that's what I think about Bret Hart. I think Bret Hart is one of those modern, bitter old bastards, and it's sad to see. It's sad to see a guy who had such a career from the late 70s. He started working with the WWE in the early 80s, 1980, I believe it was. I think it was like right after Stampede folded. 84 was it? I don't know. But he started working there, and he worked out till 1997. And he left on horrible terms. Absolutely left on horrible terms. Montreal was not great for anybody. I think it worked out the way it was going to work out, and it wasn't great for anybody. But it's sad to see a guy, even in 2019, to see a guy who had such a great career and see him as somebody who, every time you see an interview with him, he's not talking about the great matches he had with Dave Boy Smith. He's not talking about the great matches he had with Shawn Michaels. He's not talking about the world title, the 5 WWF titles he held. He's not talking about the WCW times. I mean, WCW times weren't great, but he had a couple good moments there. He doesn't talk about those. 9 times out of 10, when you talk to Bret Hart, when you do an interview with Bret Hart, you hear about the bitterness. You hear about the bad. You hear about him burying Eric Bischoff for not being creative enough. He buries Hulk Hogan for being political. He buries Ric Flair for not having psychology. He buries Triple H for never having a good match. He buries this guy or that guy for not knowing how to work or being dangerous, whatever. And it's sad to see a guy who's just, for the bitter old bastards, as far as I consider him, he's one of the younger ones, honestly. Billy Graham it's partially he's old and senile, it's partially hepatitis C eating his brain, I don't know. But he's an older guy. Ole Anderson, old as can be, he's bitter, he's never going to change. But Bret's actually in that range, one of the younger guys, and it's sad to see a guy like that still just being so bitter. Like, that right there bothers me, is that as a guy who has such a great career, and he doesn't do it, he doesn't use it, he doesn't talk about it as much as he talks about how he's so A, so much better than everyone else, and B, how everything should change and this, that, and the other. Like, if you hear Vince Russo talking, and Vince Russo blah, 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 who gives a crap Vince Russo thinks? Vince Russo has an ego the size of Texas, if Texas was a giant man that said bro. But who gives a crap? Vince Russo had like a couple good years as a writer and then just complete crap ever since. Bret actually had a good decade and a half of actually a great career. And all he talks about are those few years at the end that he wasn't happy. And that's sad to say. And that's my opinion on Bret Hart. I think he's a great talent. Never the man, but never the guy, but the guy who worked with the guy. But he doesn't talk about that. He more talks about just all the stuff that didn't go wrong between December of 97 and December of 99. And that's sad to say. I'm going to take a second real quick to acknowledge our newest sponsor. That's right, the people that made the best of WCW Volumes 1, 2, and 3, the best of Nitro, the rise and fall of WCW, the Monday Night War, and everything you can imagine about WCW. Making money from their tape library like only the WWE can. It's now the worst of WCW. Enjoy hours of programming with some unforgettable moments like electrocuting Abdullah the Butcher, flaming Sting, who's driving the Hummer, we don't know and neither do they, the NWO mocking a career-ending injury, a wrestling leprechaun, a guy in a giant catsuit, a butt-humping mummy, dollar store Sub-Zero, wrestlers named after the Holocaust, even more cages, Ric Flair in the Looney Bin, Scott Hall not in rehab, Kevin Nash booking Kevin Nash, the Figure Poke of Doom, the Fast Count of Lies, Bret Hart, Suntan Pedophiles, Vince Russo, World Champion. David Arquette, World Champion. The Ready to Rumble movie, a match on the back of a truck. The Dungeon of Doom, all of it. Annie Vincent match. Harlem Heat 2000, and many more. With baffling appearances by Kiss, Master P, The Insane Clown Posse, That Damn Chucky Doll, Terry Crews, Jay Leno, Beetlejuice, RoboCop, The Misfits, James Brown, Mr. T in 1994, Sable Kinda, and many more. Order yours now and get a free Renegade t-shirt. Like it or not, you're getting it. Now let's switch gears and talk about the modern product as we understand it. WrestleMania is coming up. It's WrestleMania season, everybody. Are you ready? Too bad, it's coming. This year I'm just going to go down the card, sort of go on what's going to happen and see what I think of it and sort of get your feelings on the matter. I'd like to hear what you have to say, too. Tony Nese will face Buddy Murphy for the WWE Cruiserweight title, which will undoubtedly be a sleeper match for the best match of the night, and they won't include it on the DVD because, you know. Daniel Bryan will defend the title that looks like it was on loan from Pottery Barn against Kofi Kingston. Or maybe not, but probably. They're doing a good job of building Kofi as this underdog, this guy who's fighting uphill and up against the man, Kofi versus the world and everything. But it's been done before. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. It's a good basic understanding of it. It's a basic underdog story, and people get behind it, and it's good, and it's a good idea. The only thing is, and I hope he wins the belt, I really do. The only thing is, what do you do after? Because you can do all this stuff to put the belt on a guy, but if you put the belt on him and the first thing you do is undercut him, then nothing really matters. I hope he gets the belt. I hope he gets rid of the title belt that looks like it has 2 part-time jobs as a barista, but then I also hope that it leads to something more, a rematch with Daniel Bryan, or something down the line. If you're going to put the belt on him, you better do something with it, because if you don't, you're going to end up with another Jack Swagger, or, God forbid, another Dolph Ziggler, something with potential but just doesn't get anywhere. So I hope they do, and we'll see if they actually do it, I guess. Kurt Angle will supposedly have his retirement match, for real this time, against everyone's favorite meathead, Baron Corbin, in what proves to be a match. Yeah, I guess it's happening. I don't know. A face Miz will face a heel Shane McMahon in a Falls Count Anywhere match because we live in Bizarro world where this makes sense. Shane McMahon, Miz put together the tag team, building the dad thing and all this stuff. It was set up from the minute they started it. You know where it was going. I don't know. The match will be... Here's what the match is going to be. I'm going to tell you right now how that's going to go. It's going to go probably a little too long. Shane McMahon will do some kind of weird bump that will be amazing to watch on replays and future clips, but will not be the finish of the match for some reason. And the Miz will probably pick up the win because of the babyface story. And through it all, the only thing we know for sure is that the Miz's dad will be there to make inappropriate face gestures the whole frickin' time. So it's something to look forward to, folks. And what's going to be the main event, Becky Lynch will face off against Ronda Rousey and Charlotte Flair, because you have to shoehorn Charlotte Flair in there, because otherwise it's not a women's match. Listen, I understand the idea behind Becky Lynch and Charlotte Flair both being workers. And Ronda Rousey, for all the notoriety she's brought, for all the mainstream appeal, for all the stuff they've done, maybe they don't feel like she's ready to carry a longer program, especially now that they're making it the main event because Becky Lynch is so frickin' over. So that makes sense. So I kind of understand, if you want to take Charlotte Flair and Becky Lynch and put them in and say, hey, they're the workers and they can work around Ronda and all these things, fine. But why the hell did they also give Charlotte the SmackDown Women's title? It adds nothing to the match. It's for the women's title on Raw. It's for Ronda Rousey's belt. Becky Lynch is going to win it. We all know that. But having the SmackDown belt, which is not on the line, it does nothing for the match. It adds nothing to the match. All it does is take away a SmackDown Women's title match at Mania. That's what they did. They put the belt on Charlotte Flair, so Charlotte Flair can walk in with a belt that is not on the line to be in another match for another title that she's not going to win. Meanwhile, there's an entire roster of women who work all year to have maybe a chance, and I'm talking individually, maybe get a shot at a belt at WrestleMania. And that is removed, A, because they're not going to contend for the Raw belt because it's Ronda Rousey and Becky Lynch. We've known that for months now. But now they can't even contend for the SmackDown belt because the SmackDown belt's on the third person in that match when it's not even being defended. So I don't understand the point in that. I don't get it. But again, they don't consult me, so who the hell knows? Brock Lesnar will defend the WWE Universal Championship against Seth Rollins. For all intents and purposes, the way they're building it, Seth Rollins should win. It's a good, strong babyface push. He's sort of this natural progression. I mean, if you could liken it to a Triple H in a way, years ago, sort of this natural progression to eventually winning the belt, being this. And yes, he's held the belt before and he got injured injured. And I mean, seeing the progression of, okay, the Intercontinental belt, have a really great feud with Dean Ambrose, did the Shield rides again stuff. He's coming in, and now he's going up against Brock Lesnar. And of course, Brock Lesnar looks unbeatable as they make him unbeatable because he does 28 suplexes and goes back to his horse-faced wife. But, okay. But the thing is, Rollins should win. But the thing is, WWE's still in this let's shock him mindset that, you know what, Brock might still win. You know why? Because they're making Saudi Arabia murder money. You think they give a crap what we think? No, not really. So it's still a crapshoot. I hope Rollins wins. But the fact, if it was the main event, Rollins would probably win. But if it's not the main event, which it's not, because the women's three-way is going to be the main event, they might not. I mean, honestly, with all this build-up and all this stuff, because you know what? And here's why they do it, just because it's a surprise. Because the natural progression is, oh, well, Rollins is going to win ultimately, right? And they might just go, oh, they're expecting, let's have Brock win again. Let's Brock do 24 suplexes tonight and then get the win because, shocking. Triple H versus Batista, a star of Guardians of the Galaxy versus the star of The Chaperone, which is kind of like comparing Titanic to amateur porn. I know what they're doing. I don't think it'll be great. I mean, understand, Dave Batista is in the Avengers Endgame. He's a big movie star, and the fact that they get him to come back and do something like they've done years past with The Rock, that's awesome. I get it. I'm not one of those myopic pro wrestling fans who looks at it and goes, oh, the match won't be great. The match will be what it is. It'll be standard by the numbers. They're not going to do anything that's going to get Dave Batista hurt on purpose. They're not going to do anything that's going to exert Triple H too much. But understand, this is a 50-year-old fighting a 49-year-old over the honor of a 70-year-old. Remember in 1996 when the WWF used to do sketches about the old-timers like Hogan and Savage were 43 and 44 at the time? My, how times have changed. Don't go into it thinking it's going to be a great match. Go into it thinking it's going to be a Marvel tie-in, where Drax faces off against an older version of the guy who played one of the guys in that bad Blade movie, and move on with your lives. Enjoy it for what it is. Don't expect too much, and you won't be disappointed. Roman Reigns will face Drew McIntyre, and it will probably be a good match, honestly. No hate. I don't hate Roman Reigns. I think that the Lex Luger-ish shove down people's throats didn't do him any favors, but he's back. He's got some actual goodwill. It's unfortunate that everything had to go the way it did with the leukemia and all those things, and he got sick, and that's wrestling or not, that's not good. But it actually seems like he has some real good will, some good cachet right now, so maybe he should use that. And he's going against Drew McIntyre, who's really talented, and but honestly, it's just good to see Roman Reigns in a WrestleMania match that isn't against Brock Lesnar for a change, and one they don't have to filter out the booze. So that's called progress, people. AJ Styles will go one-on-one with Randy Orton, which will combine the thrilling abilities of AJ Styles with the mind-numbingly boring efficiency of Orton. The one thing we know for sure is that Michael Cole will go into a vintage-induced coma, God willing. Samoa Joe will miss what's considered basically a naturally fit match with John Cena, guys who started wrestling together in UPW back in the day under Rick Bassman, and he's going to face Rey Mysterio for the U.S. title. I think it'll be a good match. I think Rey Mysterio's sort of doing the best hits, but the thing is about Rey Mysterio is his best hits are still pretty damn good. Samoa Joe can do pretty much anything. I think they're kind of missing out on this big match feel. I mean, John Cena's part-time now. He's off doing movies and TV shows and getting JBL haircuts, and he swings back in and does a WrestleMania match and he leaves, or he swings in and he does a Saudi Arabia match and then he leaves, and he swings in and does something in China and then he leaves. He's like a non-committal stepdad, just comes in, how you doing, champ, and then he leaves, whatever. But I think you're sort of missing a big match feel here. But again, they aren't going to consult me, so what does it matter? Just my opinion, whatever. The women's tag team titles will be on the line in a 4-way match between the Boss and Hug connection of Sasha Banks and Bayley, who are defending against two Aussie girls that misspell iconic, Nia Jax and Tamina, and the returning Divas of Doom, of course, Beth Phoenix and Natalya. Not really much to complain about here. I think it'll be good. I think that with the talent that are in there, they can actually make a very, very interesting match. I hope it doesn't get cluttered, and we'll see how it pans out, but I'm optimistic. And in a match sure to increase sales of popcorn at concessions, Finn Balor will face Bobby Lashley once again in a match that didn't matter then, won't matter now, and won't matter in a year when Lashley is once again gone and doing a middling MMA career. My God, is there any match more boring or more blah than seeing Bobby Lashley and Finn Balor? I like Finn Balor. I don't really give a crap about Bobby Lashley. I think his personality from last time went from none to now he bends over and moves his ass cheeks sometimes. I don't know. That's not a personality to me. Whereas Headband, He wore a headband. That's a personality for him. But Finn Balor and Bobby Lashley, I don't care. I don't care if it's WrestleMania. I don't care if it's the next pay-per-view, which is probably in 3.5 weeks or 4 weeks or 2 weeks. I don't care. It doesn't matter. It's a popcorn match. Whatever. Do your thing. Move on. Collect a check. The WWE Women's Division will be appearing once again. They will get a part of that. Sweet WrestleMania also ran pie with their own Women's Battle Royal, where every woman not booked in another match will get a chance. Well, probably most of them. I don't know how many they employ now, but a bunch. And they'll be in the match, and they'll get a chance to get in the ring and make a WrestleMania payday and collect a check, and then eventually maybe get in a match and get a chance to lose to Charlotte, Becky, or Ronda in the future. So yay! But at least everyone I've mentioned above isn't in the following match. The Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal will also happen again, because of course, where everyone sort of left off will get their WrestleMania paycheck. Competitors in this yearly event include Braun Strowman, SNL hosts Colin Jost and Michael Che, yes, I'm serious, Andrade, Apollo Crews, he's still there, Titus O'Neil, Tyler Breeze, Jinder Mahal, No Way Jose, and I assume the Conga Line, Bobby Roode, Chad Gable, Kalisto, Grand Metalik, Lindsay Dorado, Bo Dallas, Curtis Axel, again, still there it seems, Heath Slater, Rhino, Victor and Connor, because you can't have a WrestleMania without them, Ali, because first names are forbidden, Shelton Benjamin, Luke Gallows, Carl Anderson, no wonder these guys want to leave. You know, they're going to use this WrestleMania money to move closer to Florida for no reason whatsoever. Wink, wink. Matt Hardy, Jeff Hardy, Otis, Tucker, and EC3 if he's still working there by this point. Yep, that's 26 of the supposed 30 competitors going to be in this. Wow. 2 of them work for Saturday Night Live. Think about that for a second. Of this Battle Royal, that's this Andre the Giant Battle Royal, this big thing, I mean, who's the biggest star? Who's the biggest star in this whole thing? Of the 30 guys, the biggest star is Braun Strowman, who they're going to use only because they call in Jost and Michael Che. So he's going to be doing stuff with the SNL guys. Everyone else is either not doing anything, they have no spot for them in this 14-match card, by the way, or they're guys who are just collecting a check. Otis and Tucker have done, they're heavy machinery, whatever. I noticed they don't have last names, Otis and Tucker, other names are, Gallows and Anderson being wasted, Shelton Benjamin, nothing. Mustafa Ali, for all the stuff they've been doing with him, man, they just throw him in this? Really? Like, I get that it's WrestleMania, but really? Just chuck him in with all these other... You're gonna chuck him in with Lindsay Dorado and Bo Dallas? Really? Really? Okay. Maybe TJP had the great idea here, but just get the hell out. I don't know, man. Because this is, don't get me wrong, I think Mustafa Ali's going to have a better angle or something in the future, but for WrestleMania, just to throw him in there with 25 other scrubs, including 2 SNL hosts. Woo. Now, of course, it's 26 out of 30, so there's a chance they could have some surprising ones, But if history's shown anything, these surprise entrants are usually people that are either A, celebrities, and sort of a surprise, which defeats the purpose of having a celebrity, or B, not really that effective, like Gronk or Tatanka, whoever is doing Doink this week. Don't laugh. Michael Hayes is considering it right now. That's WrestleMania this year. To me, honestly, as a fan, I don't know, maybe it's just my age or whatever, but it's just underwhelming. I think there's a couple great matches in there. I think Roman Reigns and Drew McIntyre can be good. I think the main event is going to be good because of the pop. When Becky Lynch gets the win, there's going to be a huge pop there. It's going to be big, and I think the fact that they're having a women's match in the main event, understand the women's match is the main event only because of Ronda Rousey, for better or worse. That's why. It's not that they have this great story. They do have this great story with Ronda and Charlotte and Becky. It's a great story on its own. But if Ronda Rousey wasn't the third person in that match, it wouldn't be the main event. And that's, you can say what you want, but it is the mainstream. You can say, hey, when she came in and did the armbar on Stephanie McMahon and all this stuff, and she had the this, that, and the other. When you have that, okay, of course you're gonna have those mainstream eyeballs glued to you. Now you're putting them in the main event. Yeah, that's what this is. This is the main event. It's the main event because Ronda Rousey's in it. But I still think it's gonna be a great pop. I think Charlotte and Ronda are gonna come in as heels. Becky's going to come in as this anti-hero type, and when she gets the win on whichever one, it's going to be huge. It's going to be a great pop, so I think that's got a lot of potential. Like I said, I think Samoa Joe and Rey Mysterio can have a great match. I think it's sort of out of nowhere, but I think it could be a great match. I think Finn Balor and Bobby Lashley will bore people to tears, myself included. The women's battle royal is just like the men's battle royal, the Andre battle royal. It's just there. It's hard to say. I mean, I get the idea of everyone getting a paycheck, and there's nothing wrong with them getting their check, and I'm not resenting them for it. I get it. If you're in the ring, if you're part of the show, pre-show, pay-per-view, what have you, you're getting a WrestleMania check, and that's good and that's great. And I'm not begrudging anybody, but quality-wise, it's gonna be what it is. AJ Styles and Randy Orton is just gonna, I don't know. It could be either way. I mean, honestly, I've said it. I think, I've never been in the ring with Randy Orton, so I'm not going to say how he is. I've heard from, everyone who's ever talked about him oh, he's so great, he's so smooth, and I'm sure efficiently he's great. As a character, I don't think he's anything interesting since the IED storyline with Triple H at WrestleMania 25. So 10 years. I haven't, nothing interesting from him in that time, like character-wise. So him and AJ Styles could be good, but it could just be a snore fest like him and Bray Wyatt. I don't know. We'll see. So that's WrestleMania this year. WrestleMania 35. Again, they're not going to call it WrestleMania 35 because saying numbers now makes you old, but putting a 49-year-old against a 50-year-old, perfectly fine. So that's WWF logic. WWE. Sorry, pandas. Screw the pandas. Anyway, I'd like to hear your feelings on this. What do you think? What do you think of WrestleMania? What do you think's going to go down? What do you think will be the best match? What could be the worst match? If you listen to this, I want more interaction with people. I want people to respond. I'm just talking out there, and people that listen to the show, thank you so much for listening. But I want interaction. I want to talk to people. I want to, I'm not some expert or anything, but I'd like to answer a question the best I know how, even if it's an opinion. Or if you got your opinion, share it with me. Share it below the video on Twitter, the Exploder Pod. We are on everything. We're on iTunes. We're on Podbean. I am part of the ZTO network. Big shout out to Frank England, who is the producer of this show, who's the head of ZTO, who guy I've been working with now for how many years. The guy who really got me into doing podcasts and got me into doing this. So thank you. I want to say a big shout out to Frank England, to ZTO. Check them out at Zombie Takeover TV on Facebook. And I want to hear from you guys. What's going on? What do you think? Do you think I'm full of crap? What do you think about my take on Bret Hart? What do you think of my my quote unquote sponsors in the middle of the show? What do you think? Just give us the feedback, see what you're doing, and that's gonna be all. So until next time, my name's Dan. This is Exploder. Have a good one.